Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are very excited to have today a very special guest. As you all know, we have in our thesis, undergraduate thesis studio that consists out of 4 cohorts, 2 guest lectures, and today we have with us Tim Love from Utile. I want to quickly introduce Tim, and then he has an amazing presentation. Afterwards, I hope we have a couple of Q&A questions. So Tim is here on the screen. You can see him next to his postcard. But I quickly want to officially introduce him. Tim Love is a founding principal of Utile, 85-person Boston-based architecture and planning firm. Love's primary focus is the relationship between individual works of architecture and the larger city. His work is not driven by aesthetics, but the collaborative, deep dive research focused on the technical, cultural, regulatory, and environmental issues of urban design and architectural problems. Love and his teams find opportunities for design by uncovering latent issues and fully leveraging and synthesizing them. Love's work on diverse projects of Love works to contribute to diverse projects of varying scales, including regeneration strategies for aging industrial areas, master plans for new urban districts, and housing projects. Love and his collaborators are also known for their award-winning public realm initiatives, including Boston Complete Streets Design Guidelines and the Boston Harbor Island Pavilion on the Rose Kennedy Greenway. Love serves as a strategic advisor on the Imagine Boston 2030 Citywide Plan and the Comprehensive Master Plan for Boston City Hall and the Plaza. He led the team for the Envision Cambridge Citywide Plan and is, in addition to all of his work in practice, a tenured associate professor at the Northeastern University School of Architecture, where he teaches urban design history theory as well as research studios. And, Tim Love is also an alumni of our school. You participated in our undergraduate program, right, Tim? And he's on our board. So he has deep roots with our institution here. A lot of love for our students. On a regular basis, joins us for final reviews. And if we are lucky, we will have him as well on our final review in May. So please join me in welcoming Tim Love to our lecture today.
Thanks so much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Let me just make sure this is working. I think this postcard file is big, so I don't, maybe things are stuck. Give me a second here. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So I think the faculty polled you all and asked which projects you wanted me to talk about, which was the most random list of projects. And it required me to come up with a whole new talk from scratch. So I usually have a couple of presentations in the can. And so this talk is called Like a Think Tank, which is actually one of our taglines. And it's a way to think through some relationships between the projects you were most interested in. And I think I wanted to, because your thesis students highlight the way in practice research plays a role in the evolving preoccupations of the office, but how we choose projects and let's see what we do next. A little bit more about UVA. I have a BS in architecture from UVA. I graduated in 1984, which is a million years ago. And one of the through lines is that I still love axons and isometrics. And so this is a drawing that I did with Adam Urinsky as part of an undergraduate independent urban design studio in 1984. That's Vinegar Hill. We did a kind of pre-CNU style infill proposal for Vinegar Hill and Axon. And then when we were moving to a new office in Boston, we took a lot of the digital files of different parts of Boston, merged them together rather randomly you can see maybe that South Station, the main train station, is orphaned in a residential district. And because I used to draw blimps in my projects when I was an undergrad, the Utile blimp was born, which is now on our T-shirts for our softball team. So that's how UVA lives, I suppose, at one level. We're now over 90 people. I have now 5 partners. And we have a practice that's mostly people trained as architects, either doing architecture projects or urban design. But we have now 6 what I call pure planners who have planning degrees. And currently today, those people either went to MIT or the GSD and have planning degrees. And that's part of the story I want to tell. We we strive for design excellence. Uh, these are things that I think all firms do. We have emerged as probably in Massachusetts, the firm with the most expertise around passive house. We have an in-house team that does energy modeling. And that's important because a lot of the affordable housing, low-income tax credits are, if you commit to passive house, that developer moves to the top of the list. So it's incentivized passive house with affordable housing developers. And then we have a vigorous program internal to the office around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion that ranges from community work that we do to programming to do in the office. We have a thing called Utile University where we have speakers come, and even some of the projects that we seek out. In terms of project types, it's quite wide-ranging. I used to tell people we're a little Sasaki, but we might be as big as them now. We do a lot of our interior architecture. These are all examples of that. I'm just showing you kind of the breadth of what we do. We do a lot of civic and academic work. We are now doing our 4th branch library for the city of Boston. I'm going to tell the story about City Hall in a minute. We do a lot of academic work, mostly for private independent schools. And that's one of the projects I think some of you were interested in that was on the poster, the postcard. We do market rate residential projects of all scales, mostly just below high rise, but have a couple of high rise projects in our portfolio. And then have quite expansive affordable housing practice. And given the economy right now, 2/3 of the residential projects in our office are LIHTC financed affordable housing projects. Those tend to be 50 to 70 unit projects just because of the priorities of the state in terms of awarding low income tax credits. A big piece of what I do is urban design and planning, including citywide comp plans, district plans. We do a lot of design guidelines for streets. We just wrapped up the Boston Transit Authority's bus rapid transit design guidelines. We occasionally work in the Middle East, which are the images on the right, but you can see that our design work really happens at all scales, but still design. We're kind of a design first practice, even when we're doing our planning work. So, given the projects you wanted me to talk about, I thought I would tell 3 stories about how the pure research we do and the research we do through specific projects then leads to the next project and or a pure research assignment. And so I have 3 stories to tell you today. The first is about a mid-century modern building reuse. City Hall's part of that story. Missing middle housing is the Pittsfield housing that is within that story. And then we're doing more and more work on flood resiliency issues, especially in coastal New England. And that's another story I'm going to tell. And I think what I want to maybe suggest to people who are doing their thesis projects now is that it is possible to chart a course in practice that um, puts research topics first. And that requires some opportunism, some strategy, some tactical thinking, and I'll maybe explain how that works. So I want to start with mid-century modern reuse. And the story begins that the city of Boston put out an RFP for a master plan for City Hall and the Plaza. We teamed with Reed Hildebrand, the landscape architecture firm that I think many of you know. And lo and behold, we were awarded the commission. And we, in a way, turned the assignment on its head a little bit and proposed that the first issue to deal with City Hall was to think about the way that program was distributed in the building. And if you don't know Boston City Hall, I have an image in a minute. But the original vision for City Hall was that all of the bureaucracy was lifted up in this kind of cake-like form above, and all of the public functions would happen in a kind of indoor-outdoor zone where the public could freely come and go. And what had happened over the years, because the bureaucracy liked to have the public meetings near them, they didn't like to go downstairs, is that the public meeting rooms and hearing rooms migrated upstairs. And because of 9/11 and security protocols, there was no free wandering of the public coming into the building. And so the prosaic stuff like paying your parking tickets were down on the lower levels, and the meetings where real decisions happened, hearing rooms, meeting rooms, decisions about development approvals happened upstairs. And so our proposal was to reassert the diagram of the cross section, move any meeting room that had to do with the public back down closer to the plaza and the plane, and then only have conference rooms for internal staff meetings with the different departments upstairs. And this led to a template for cleaning up the floor plan of each floor that would make, and I don't have these in the presentation, make the wayfinding at each floor level when you got off, which is now like a rabbit warren of corridors and things, much clearer. But more importantly, we suggested that City Hall should open in even places where it doesn't open today. And so you can see in this cross section that we propose a new opening where this blue tone is to allow City Hall Plaza to slide right into this kind of public zone of the building, and to really make the outdoor connections even stronger than they were in the original competition entry, and that the security protocols would be dealt with when you went up to see a city councilor or you went to see a department. And so this was the rendering. Reed Hildebrand reproposed the plaza so that we dealt with all of the accessibility issues. And the consequences of this project is that we've been doing interior renovations of City Hall now, probably for 5 or 6 years, little projects here and there. And at Sasaki actually won the follow-up RFP to do the landscape and not Reed Hildebrand. So we've done things like relight the entire building, both the inside and the outside, with LED lights, which makes the inside of the outside of the building much more elegant and much more lovable. The city decided to do that first to change perceptions about the building. And we reorganized the entry sequence at the plaza level to sort out staff from visitors, and introduced a cafe. And the consequence of the work that we did is that we partnered with the city of Boston to apply for a Getty conservation grant, quite a sizable one. And the consequence of that is that we worked on a very detailed conservation plan for City Hall that is tied into the funding resources for future renovations as we move up, down, and through the building. So that's the City Hall story, and I'm only telling you it because um, uh, through the project and then the work we did with other consultants to win this grant and to do this work meant that we were uh, suddenly in the Docomomo Club, and we're highly qualified to do other kinds of projects like this. And I have a partner, and there's an associate partner in the firm who focus on this kind of work as a kind of subspecialty. One good example of that is a project that we recently completed. It's another Coleman, McKinnell, and Wood building. It was the uh, Roxbury Branch Library, which at the time when it was built as a fortress without any windows in it. There was glass brick into the building, but otherwise it presented this image to the street. It was at a time, this is an African American community, when uh, uh, this part of the city was going through the same kinds of issues that was happening in other American cities. And the commissioning of it was timed with the busing crisis in Boston. So I don't know why the iconography of this building was deemed appropriate, but so be it. And our proposal was um, the entrance was tucked around to the side. There was an intervention about 10 years ago to make it more visible, was to have a new entrance face the square directly and make the entrance into the building as inviting as possible. And so unlike City Hall, which required, I think, for political reasons, a lighter touch, we kept all of the concrete bits of the buildings, but replaced the glass brick and the concrete block infill with glass. And so this is on the right is a plan of the existing building. You can see how much of the reading room was protected by solid walls. And then on the left is an axonometric of our new entrance intervention and the new glazing that was placed in the front. So this is what the library looked like pre-renovation, looking at the glass brick that you see, and these very strange diffusers that drop down from the ceiling, almost like incomplete columns. And then the presentation of the side elevation of the building with the glass brick opened up with views into the reading room, and then the use of those baffles to deal with the acoustical issues that were in there, requiring a lot of mock-ups to make sure that those worked. So that's the consequences of that's the finished space. We're doing a whole range now of 1960s, early 1970s cultural and academic buildings from the same era, based on the work we've done, the research we've done, and the knowledge we've gained about the architects during this period that built the vast majority of these projects. So I guess this is a story about building up expertise, finding collaborators that have enough of a passion that this becomes their own vocational interest. And what we tend to do in the office is do a project. Some members of the team fall in love with that project type, and then that means that becomes an expertise that gives us, let's say, both the confidence and the qualifications to get the next kind of project. And that's in a way, a kind of research, I would say. The next story I want to tell is on missing middle housing, which is an important issue because the vast majority of our market rate housing and affordable housing is organized around double-loaded corridors. They're corridor accessed housing, and the vast majority of that tends to be buildings of 6 or 7 stories that are just under high rise, because that's what the market likes to build, because the highest rate of return for housing is if you build just below code thresholds. And so we've developed an expertise about that, but a double-loaded corridor residential project is also a little bit boring, because the logics about the building code, where the market likes the size of the typical floor plate to be, is relatively formulaic. So we've made a real effort over the last couple of years to look for opportunities to design housing at a smaller scale. And those opportunities tend to bubble up actually from our urban design and planning work. And so the way this story goes is that there is a former working class neighborhood in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. It's where the biggest GE plant in the world was. Jack Welch, the former CEO of Pittsfield, was based in Pittsfield. And we worked with a state agency called Mass Development to come up with building prototypes that would work on typical vacant parcels in the neighborhood, so that a developer contractor could respond to an RFP for a lot of sites and then build the same basic building. It's a single project scattered site approach to development that made these sites feasible. And for this particular area in Pittsfield, we designed a very clever 3-unit building that looks like a house from the street. And the idea is that you would build 24 units, but you might do that on, in this case, 4 sites. And you can see them identified with little orange chiclets on the slide if the resolution is good. And so this is the housing type drawn in the context of not fully designed, because this was a planning study for the state. This isn't schematic design, it's conceptual design. But the way the type works is that there are 2 accessible units on the ground floor. Those are both 1-bedroom units. And then there's a 2-bedroom unit on the second floor, and that unit has 2 access stairs, one from the front stoop, and then one that drops down to the parking in the back. And a financial pro forma was developed. This penciled out. We met with contractors who were also developers, and this was the strategy. The consequence of that plan is that an impact investor, but a private investor, partly motivated by the study that we did, acquired a lot of those parcels, just not through the state, but through the open market. And they had us test a slightly denser prototype that would serve the same function. And I'll show you in a minute the type that we came up with was actually based on a row house module, but each module of the row house would actually have 2 units, a flat on the ground floor that was fully accessible, and then a 2-story unit that sat on top of that. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And so what you're seeing in this slide is test fits of buildings that the developer had owned and had improved. Those are in blue. Buildings that they were thinking of acquiring in the red color, and then the typology we developed in yellow. And in this case, you're seeing the typology we developed, the ground floor plans scattered around buildings they own with a kind of urban realm idea that would connect them. And then the actual project that we built included those modules along what's called Tyler Street, and then just one of the modules facing a lot that they happen to own, with the parking kind of behind. So this is what the project looks like. Each of the pitches is actually 2 modules, And so those modules have a slightly different roof shape that can be combined in different ways to create different profiles. You're seeing just 2 modules on the lone lot here, and then a sequence of them along Tyler Street on the left. The way these plans work, and this is what the street frontage looks like. It's this is low cost. This is attainable market rate housing. The flats are on the ground floor. They have a private patio, which you can see adjacent to them. And then the duplexes, which sit on top of the flats. This is a duplex, duplex, duplex. They have their own patio sitting on top of the larger plan of the ground floor unit. And then they share, 2 modules share a stair down to the parking. And so you can see this is the ground, this is the flat, which is only accessed from the parking side. So the living room faces the patio, the bedroom is on the street side. And then the duplexes have their own private stairs that run up, so that really functions almost like a row house from the street side. So that's the street side is only the entrance for the units on the second floor that also have a top floor. And so this is what it looks like from the living room of the 2-story unit, looking down your own stair and out the front door, and then how those stairs stack to take you up to the bedroom floor, just to show you how these are organized. But I think the point of showing you this is that you can have much more spatial fun with missing middle housing. I mean, this is just Tim as a designer talking, than you can in terms of interior spatial configuration with a corridor accessed residential typology. This has led to a whole proliferation of opportunities for us, including we did the State of Vermont's Missing Middle Guidebook called Vermont Homes for All, which, if you're interested, you can Google and find the full document. We actually designed a whole series of typologies that work on the lots of Vermont's second-tier cities, which are actually quite small. And the toolkit includes plans and dimensions meant to suggest that builder developers or design build firms could execute these, all very carefully considered in terms of numbers of units, egress, all of the code issues that you have to deal with. And more recently, I've been very involved with a code reform initiative in Massachusetts to increase the number of allowable floors of single access multifamily buildings from 3 floors to 6. And I have a little bit of story. I don't know, this image got stretched somehow. Because if you allow single access housing to go to 6 stories, you can suddenly unlock a lot of smaller sites that are too small to work for corridor buildings. And so I have a whole other talk about this, but the highlights are that the advantage of single access buildings over a 2-stair corridor building is that you can make different parts of the aggregation different heights because they're served by different stairs and elevators. It's also true that single stair buildings at 6 stories are safer than double loaded corridor buildings with 2 stairs, because this is a legal footprint for a 2-stair building, according to IBC and in Massachusetts. And so this is the proposed code, and we wrote a report about it, and the governor's housing commission has included this as one of the governor's top 5 priorities now for Massachusetts. So there's a good chance that this will move ahead in the next, 6 months, year. We then looked at all of the sites within a 15-minute walk of transit, had an FAR of less than 1, which means they were underdeveloped, and were between 3 and 15,000 square feet, because that's the perfect size for a single-stair residential building. Under 15,000 square feet, you can't get a double-loaded corridor building to work. And the consequences of that is that there are almost 5,000 parcels within the watershed of transit around Boston, that would be eligible for these buildings that would be unlocked if the building code was changed. So that's the story about missing middle housing. You can see it's taken many different directions. And this is an image of what that scale is within a kind of existing context. My last story is about resiliency. I think in this case, we became interested in this topic actually through a design competition, and then became technical experts later. Probably about 12 years ago, there was a competition in the city of Boston to think about an area in Boston called the Fort Point Channel District, because it was vulnerable to flooding. And our concept was to take the typical podium that a residential building has, typically where the parking is, and to build the top deck of that podium so that it would be structurally robust enough so that in the future you could move the public realm up to that level. This was an ideas competition. The practically minded people in the audience are wondering how a developer would finance overstructuring the top of a podium to make this happen. And then, in 2100, the entire public realm would move up to this new level. And so you can see in this axon the typical landscape on top of a podium that you see with that's the amenitized landscape that happens, becoming the city itself. And then because we always overdo the representation, we did and the requirement was a big poster. We showed the existing condition a couple of years after the competition in 2015. We showed the intermediate situation where the podium level of those buildings already begins to get a public realm, and the key street through the district, A Street, is actually elevated. And then in 2100, the entire city is up at that level, and the lower level then is a flooded landscape. So I don't have time to get into the nooks and crannies of this, but there was a big team involved, and as typical, a couple of people got captivated by the topic and kind of carried this question forward in terms of the kinds of projects we sought after. And so the kind of consequence of that is that we were hired by the city of Boston to do the city's coastal flood resiliency plan, which required us teaming with a whole team of experts to map all of the places where the city would be vulnerable in 2070, which is all of the light blue, including the South End in Boston, which is a very nice 19th century row house neighborhood. And then setting a set of design standards that would be required moving forward for either renovations or new construction if your parcel happened to fall in the blue districts. Again, I don't have a lot of time to tell you the full story here, but for each building typology, we did a kind of before and after. The kinds of this, in this case, this is a building renovation. The same district, by the way, is the Fort Point Channel District that was the subject of the competition before. The things that you would have to do to make your building resilient, which would be to lift up the ground level, move key infrastructure above the floodplain. You can see the build to line appearing in all of the graphics. And we drilled into then a toolkit of potential solutions so that these solutions would be compatible also with maintaining some semblance of an active public realm. And so the guidelines included a lot of graphics like this. Um, but even tackling the kind of vernacular kind of buildings that you find in Boston, like triple deckers. And that led to another project that I think some of you ordered up. This work then led to this other competition we entered, which was a full comprehensive vision about how Boston's ubiquitous triple deckers could be improved um, based on resiliency issues, but new ways of living. And so that concludes my talk.